Well, once again, thank you all for spending a little time with me today. We only had two questions that were put in the question and answer box. And so I'm going to add in a third, which is just something that I thought would be interesting for you. The first question comes from Tilda. And she said, my question is about you. And if you would like to share with us, can you share how Bob Mulligan became who he is and what he does today? What got you interested in astrology in the first place, etc.? Have a great day. Well, that's who would answer that question? I have to just, I'll get, I've talked my history in other places, but I'll just say briefly, for many lifetimes, I've been a seeker of God realization. And, it's like the myth of Sisyphus. You get close and then something upsets the apple cart. I don't know if it's useful or interesting to you. Been in many countries and under many circumstances. Most recently, of course, most of my old lifetimes were in India, and my most recent lifetime was in India. How I got into astrology, I talked about that in my talk, my early days in astrology, but just as a quick repeat, my spiritual master came and rescued me in June of 1970. And in 1973, after days of him pestering me, isn't it time you had a career, and what would you like to do? And I finally just kept putting it back on him and saying, you choose. And then he just clapped his hand and said, done. And the next day was Thanksgiving. I went up and had an experience of the whole universe as Big Mandela. I came back into my physical body on Thanksgiving Day, 1973. And immediately started doing astrology, and not having even a casual interest in it really before that time. But one of my early astrology teachers, who was, I had gone to see for an appointment years before, said that I would become a professional astrologer. I thought that was, I thought he was right about everything except that. I thought that was silly, because astrologers were people who walked around with a lot of books and did a lot of math and calculated stuff. And I thought, this is so totally not me. It's Father's Day, and one of my children is calling in, but I will call him back later. Anyway, happy Father's Day to all of you. Anyway, what I'm saying is that, so I started doing astrology Thanksgiving Day, 1973. And germane to our talk today, I started teaching astrology almost immediately and had good classes, good students. I was living in Chicago at the time, and then almost immediately started a practice down in Champaign-Urbana and started teaching astrology there. And one of my first classes was, well, actually, my first class in Champaign was, I was determined to teach the zodiac to people. Now, I know that may sound extremely pedestrian, but I had stumbled on something that changed my orientation toward the field, which was a book by a guy named Henry Van Stone, had published back in 1912 on zodiacal symbolism. And he had made an attempt to correlate the 12 signs of the zodiac with the 12 Nidanas. And I've spent almost 50 years of my life exploring the same concept. And I'm going to distill out some insights from that for you in a little bit. So that was how I got into astrology, and as my spiritual path dictates, I would probably, my daughter Katie said I should have a t-shirt that says I'd rather be alone on a mountaintop by myself, which is true. But the karma dictates, and to please my master, it's a life of service, which is fine. It fits my personality quite well in many regards. And astrology is just my method of service. It's, that's why I spend so much time on my newsletter. That's why I do these question and answer sessions. And it's why I see clients. It's, the gist of my spiritual path, basically. So why do I hold back on this? Some of the things that, that are important to me, some of the astrological concepts and things that I work on are very simple, but they're not easy. And they're very difficult to convey to people, to make them useful in their lives. And, the reason that I've been writing on this book under my master's direction since 2004 is that I'm in the process, I have been in the process for all these years, distilling what knowledge I have that is useful for speeding up a person's quest for higher consciousness. So this is a segue into the second question, which may seem completely beside the point, but really is quite germane to this. It comes from Adair Adams, a dear friend of mine living in India. It says, Bob, what is the get out of jail free card that you mentioned for Donald Trump? What is the aspect and the house that it is in? Well, people probably, we've talked about this in other talks, and Adair has listened to these other talks, has been in some of them, where I've used Donald Trump's chart. But I'm going to share with you now, wrong chart, here we go. Back up, stop sharing. Okay, let me get, okay, here we go. Okay, now let me see. And Donald Trump has Jupiter trining Uranus. Now, what falls between Jupiter and Uranus? Saturn. And Saturn is the Lord of Karma. As Dane Ridjar referred to it, it's the skin of our solar system. So anything that's beyond that is a transcendental planet. Jupiter is the planet of luck. The trine between Jupiter and Uranus is a lucky symbol. And I call it Donald Trump's get out of jail free card. Now he has Uranus conjunct the north node of the moon and the sun, and Jupiter trining it from the second house. Now the second house is the memory track. It's the stored consolidated possessions from all of our past incarnations. So he has Neptune and Jupiter there, which is to say he lives in, fantasy land. And Uranus to Jupiter in air signs shows his ability to convey this, his delusion to people. So when he tells a lie and people call him on it, he tells a bigger lie. Now, Uranus rules the seventh house, which is one-to-one relationships. So people who get close to him either know he's completely nuts, or they get charmed by him and pulled into this alternative world. Now, does that, again, I know that many of you, and myself included, were sad when he was first elected president, and would see him lie and lie and lie and get away with it. He raped people. He, did all of these, like stole, lied, all of the things that we would think as human beings, well, those are terrible things. And how come he never has to pay for them? Well, we all have to pay for our sins, so to speak. But it's good for us as we strive for higher consciousness to remember that everybody has a role to play. Donald Trump did not invent any of the, what would you say, negative things that he lives out. And it is God-ordained position. And as I've said in other lectures, anybody who's a political leader, whether it's Bolsonaro or Hitler or George Washington, has karma with lots of people. If he didn't have that, I'm letting some people in, excuse me, it threw me off my game here. If he didn't have karma with lots of people, he would not be in that position. So that's what I had to say about that. The most important thing for all of us is just to recognize that our job is to be cognizant of what's good and bad and take our stand on truth, but not to waste any energy having negative feelings for people who do not live up to whatever standard we personally have embraced. Now, we're going to talk about this problem a little bit later, but to progress spiritually, we have to get rid of all the hatred, all of the judgment, all of the negative feelings for anybody and anything else, which is hard. I want to share personalism. My daughter Katie sent me an article on the difficulties that go on with climate change on Sanibel Island, an island close to here. And it was written by a reporter from Bloomberg. It was so well written and so carefully documented in a very non-judgmental way, but just here are the facts. And it was so well done. I wrote the author and I said, you are so appropriate. And this article was so well presented. I just wanted to thank you for it and hope you can keep up the good work. And, an author, a journalist, his time is so precious. I was touched. He wrote me back and said, well, thank you very much for your kind words. And and I thought, that's exactly what I say to people when they respond to things in my newsletter, because it it touches me that to know that somebody got something out of it. After all, a good deal of time goes into all of this stuff. Anyway, so now we're going on to the third question here, which I asked. And it's, in the editing of my book, one of the editors went absolutely nuts over something that I introduced at the beginning of my second chapter, which is the relationship between the zodiac and the 12 Nidanas, or dependent origination. And I thought it was, worthy of sharing with you, spending a little time on. At the time of his enlightenment, the Buddha said there are two ways to achieve enlightenment. One is to understand the Four Noble Truths, and the other is to understand the 12 Nidanas. And so I just wanted to share with you the Four Noble Truths, just to refresh your memory for those of you who may not be up on your Buddhist thought. What happened here? I thought I was sharing. Okay, Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths. Life is suffering. Suffering is caused by desires. With the ending of desires, suffering will cease. The best way to end desire is through the application of wisdom and intelligence to live. The Eightfold Path is the way to end desires. And then the Buddha details out the Eightfold Path. I just wanted to stop here, though, with remembering in astrology, Saturn is suffering, Mars is desire. Well, we can quibble over, suffering is, maybe attributable to a lot of other things as well, but Saturn is our karma. That's the center of what we're doing. And Mars is desire. Your Mars in your chart shows by its sign, house, aspect pattern, rulership, its general networking into the chart, shows the root desire and the pattern created out of that root desire that brought you into physical incarnation. No desire, no incarnation, period. But once we're here, what came with it? All of our karma. And so uncovering what it is through your Saturn, what you have to do while you're here, is important. I'm not going to talk about the Eightfold Path. I would just mention that the Eightfold Path is a living out, a laying out of things that are given out in the Ten Commandments, the Bible, of Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount. Basically, is to get your mind going in the right direction, to have good thoughts, good words, good deeds, as the Parsi have from Zoroaster. And all the world religions basically say the same thing. Jihad in Islam is basically to gain a victory over yourself. But we're not concerned with that as human beings. We get, we're busybodies. We want to make sure everybody else is doing the right thing, not worried about whether we're doing it or not. We want to make sure that nobody else has an abortion, but, if I get pregnant, maybe I'll go out and get one. It's like, it's all this externalization. that we live through in our environment. So what are the 12 Nidanas? What are the 12 signs of the zodiac? Well, just so happens that I can show you. I hope I can anyway. The zodiac independent arising, which is the same as the dependent origination or the 12 Nidanas. Well, the first Nidana is ignorance, but that correlates very easy with Aries, because what is air again? The 12 signs of the zodiac and the 12 Nidanas fit hand in glove, and I'll show you how, but first we'll run through them. Aries is ignorance. Aries is simple and direct, which wouldn't be if we were if we weren't in ignorance, we wouldn't create problems for ourselves. As a matter of fact, if we weren't ignorant, we wouldn't incarnate at all. Second Nidana is karma, or mental formation. Again, that is Taurus. It's the massment, bringing together. It's what we hold on to. Now, Gemini is consciousness. It's the emergence of what we would call awareness. And the 12 Nidanas, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute, create each other, meaning out of ignorance comes our karma. Out of our karma comes our consciousness. Out of consciousness comes name and form, which is the same as Cancer. Well, what is Cancer? Cancer is the sign of family, nostalgia, the past. What does name and form mean? Well, we look out into the world. Certain things have validity. Certain things are part of us, come from us, and some things are other. You know, they're either part of the family, part of the clan, or they're different. Now, it's interesting that the Tibetan that Alice Bailey was channeling when she wrote Esoteric Astrology says that all the things come into existence through 0 degrees of Cancer. That's the doorway into creation. And it is where we find the grounding in the world, you know, our sense of being born and family, all of that. Leo is our 6 senses, the 5 senses of our physical body and our mind. Now, what does that mean? Well, that's where it is through our senses, through our mind and our sense perception, that the ego forms. And the ego is, of course, is Leo. Well, what emerges out of that is contact with the external world. And Virgo takes things that happen in the external world and places them in boxes. It uses name and form to get discrimination. And out of discrimination comes our preferences. There are things we like and things that we don't like. And then there are things that we neither like nor don't like, that we're just neutral on them. Well, that is Libra. And Libra is an attempt to establish harmony. And it is out of our contact with the external world that the sense of wanting to get balance, a harmony. Now, all of this goes back to Jim. We get Um, that wasn't me coughing, by the way. And all of this goes back to a consciousness, which is Gemini, the sign of the twins, where we get some things are us and some things aren't us. And we get fascinated by the things that aren't us, and we start copying them. You know, the Gemini is the universal Xerox machine. But by the time we get to preferences, we are attempting to achieve harmony, balance. And we have things that we like and things that we don't ignore, and then things that we don't like. So that gives birth to desire. And desire are the things that we are attracted to unconsciously. They're not conscious. If we were conscious, we would just dismiss them. But the thing is here, not being conscious of them, we get addicted to them. Now, the Buddha had said, what keeps the wheel of karma spinning? What keeps us attached to the wheel of karma? He said, it's ignorance and desires. Well, guess what rules ignorance and desires? Aries and Scorpio. That is Mars. Mars, your reason for incarnating, is the root of our ignorance and our desires. Well, so our desires give clinging. Well, what is clinging? Clinging is our, attachment, as Donald Trump was saying, forget that. But the point is, clinging is where we latch on to an ideal, whether it be, the ideal may be, let me get as much stuff as I possibly can, or it may be, to live a moral life, people should do X, Y, Z. And when you're talking to a Sagittarius, many times they are busy telling everybody how things should be. And that sense of, this is the ideal. And if we're clinging to an ideal that is external to us, again, what happens? We give birth to becoming. And the becoming is Capricorn. And Capricorn codifies. It says, okay, here's the karma. You think this is a good idea? Here, well, let's make it a law. And then we have to live with the restriction of what that means. Now, the Tibetan in esoteric astrology mentions that Capricorn, 0 degrees of Capricorn, is the way out, it's the doorway out of creation. So again, if we look at Capricorn being ruled by Saturn and being hierarchical, okay, we live out our karma and then we're done. We complete the task. As Meher Baba said, on the spiritual path, there's no such thing as failure. It's only a matter of time. We'll talk about this in a minute, but the point is, becoming is a matter of time. So what happens when our becoming continues? We take birth. And out of birth, which is Aquarius, we gain a sense of our individual uniqueness. And we find ourselves in the physical body, we find ourselves here. But Aquarius is also the sign of freedom. So what the 12 Nidanas, birth, means that if you're born, you're going to die. You're going to have old age, suffering, or dying. Eventually, that's a given. And what happens when we die? Well, out of death when we die, that gives rise to ignorance. So ignorance puts us back on the wheel of karma. Now, you know, Dane Rudhyar and Walter Sampson, two astrologers that commented on the signs of the zodiac as a process. And they talked about it as a process of continuation, a cycle, not like linear, like you do X, Y, Z, and then you're done. It's like Aries leads to Taurus, leads to Gemini, leads to Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. But it doesn't end with Pisces. Dane Rudhyar, who was an Aries, said, Aries is a revolt against the nebulousness of Pisces. Aries being simple and direct. When you're talking to an Aries, it's like, as Richard Eidemann, the astrologer, used to say, not me, not here, not now. That's Pisces. But Aries says, me, here, now. It's immediate, it's in the present moment. Ramdas, another, Aries, wrote the book Be Here Now, which he talked about the virtue of living in the present moment, and talked of it as a virtue of doing it perfectly and as a path to liberation. And any sign of the zodiac can be a path to liberation, which I talk about in another place, about how your sun sign can be a tool for obtaining liberation. So, Aries is this linear position. It just goes out straight. But because it's in creation, straight line motion eventually comes back. It's recursive. It returns to its a starting point, which is Taurus. And whereas Aries is the force, Taurus is the object. It is the tamasic, fixed principle. And it is Taurus is where we get stuck. But Taurus creates form. And out of that form, consciousness, which was always latent in the soul, can emerge. It is a vessel, a vehicle for consciousness, and so on. All of these 12 signs of the zodiac and all steps of the 12 Nidanas, as I say, give birth to each other in this exact manner. I wanted to mention one other thing that I think is fascinating here, which is the signs of the zodiac are created by Jupiter. Jupiter is the ruler of space. It is outgoing. Well, Saturn, which is the creator of the 12 Nidanas, rules time. Well, time and space are the rulers of creation. They're both necessary. And we've talked in other lectures and other times I've written on this as the creation of Indra's net, the net of illusion that we get trapped in. And the key is, how do we break free? How do we get out of this? Well, so this isn't just all abstract. I want to show you the chart of Buddha here, which I think can help in the understanding of what we're talking about here. Okay. Now, it's important to get that you will see other speculations on the birth of Buddha. And I've used other charts for Buddha, but they're all within a year or two. All of the charts that I've ever used are in a year or two, even some on a day or two, or even a minute or two. But the place that the Buddha was born is not in debate. It's this small town in southern Nepal, and I've set it up for May 9th, 577 BC. How I got onto this was I was reading a book again in the early 70s. It was all of this happened right at the beginning of my study of astrology. Now, I want to be really clear on this, because the question was asked to me about how I got to where I am. There are scholars that know a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about at a much deeper level. But I, by the grace of my master, was led just bing, 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 bing to the things that I needed for the service that I was to render early on. In his book, Carl Payne Tolby talked about the end of the ancient world and the beginning of the modern age. And he said the year he got it wrong. He said it was 608 BC, but he got it from the Secret Doctrines. And he thought, why in the world would this be the case? But he had ephemeruses that were less accurate than what we have today. And he hypothesized, correctly so, that this was the time of the triple conjunction of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which happened somewhere around this time. This is the chart that I've used for the birth of Buddha, which was at the beginning of this conjunction. What is not disputed is that the Buddha was born as a Taurus with the moon in Scorpio. He was born at this full moon. He obtained enlightenment at this full moon, and he dropped his physical form on this full moon. But his birth, and I'm, from my own research, I'm very convinced that it had to be at the time of this triple conjunction. Uranus rules infinite intelligence, Neptune rules infinite bliss, and Pluto rules infinite power. And Mercury, the planet of thinking, communicating, is right here in the middle, the exact midpoint between Uranus and Pluto, which is very important, because what did we get out of the birth of Buddha? What did that incarnation bring us? Well, psychology, the martial arts, the birth of the individual, a new path toward enlightenment. He stripped away all of the heavy, jaded, overlaid imprisonments of the religions of the time, saying you don't have to bow down to gods or goddesses or do puja or any of that stuff. Look, and one of my favorite Buddha quotes, even the gods cannot defeat a man who's won a victory over himself. And so he said, hey, don't take my word for anything. Sit down and prove it to yourself. It was pure experiential, which goes along perfectly with Venus, the planet of love and beauty, being at the beginning of Aries, which is empirical, and Mars being in Leo, squaring this conglomeration of Sun to Uranus in Taurus. Again, we could go on, but my point is that the Buddha said at the time of his enlightenment that he meditated for several weeks on causality. And he came up with the 12 Nidanas. Ananda, his closest disciple, and for those of you who are with Meher Baba, Ananda served the same purpose in the Buddhist circle of 12 disciples as Erich did in Meher Baba's circle. So Ananda said to the Buddha, dependent origination appears obvious. The Buddha answered him, and this is a direct quote, do not speak this way. This dependent arising is deep in truth, and it is deep in its appearance. It is through not understanding, through not penetrating this dharma of dependent arising, that this generation of living beings has become entangled like a matted ball of thread, become like grass and rushes, unable to pass beyond the willful state of existence and samsara, the cycle of existence. So what I interpret the Buddha as telling his disciple Ananda is, look it, you can think this way, but the point is, you're just on the surface. You're not understanding the deeper meaning of what goes on here. So many times, a client has said to me, wow, I came back for a second session and you told me all kinds of stuff that I didn't realize in our first session. And I've had clients say to me 10 years into working with me, oh, why didn't you tell me this when we first started working together? Well, it wasn't any desire on my part to withhold anything. If anything, I'm, Mars in the first house. I'm like, let's get on with it. Let's do it as fast as we can. But to be sensitive to what can a person take in? What are they able to digest? When I first started doing astrology, I went to my spiritual advisor, a woman, Kitty Davy, who lived at Myrtle Beach, an old disciple of Meher Baba. And I asked her the question, what's the karma for giving people advice? I'm an astrologer. By Baba's grace, I seem to be pretty good at it. But is there karma for giving people advice? And she said, and Kitty had the knack of always answering a question that I wasn't asking. She said, your problem is that you're too rigid. If somebody comes to you and they tell you that they're having, a lot of affairs, she said, if you, start preaching the discourses to them and saying, well, Baba says you shouldn't have sex outside of marriage, the person just goes away. You haven't helped them. And if you encourage them to just have one mistress, you've moved them closer to the ideal and you've helped them. And so the question with all of the things and with the stuff that I'm talking about today, if all of this is just so much theory and it doesn't penetrate or help you understand yourself better or help you understand your chart better and get you on a better path, then it wasn't worthy of our time. So what I'm saying to you is that it's easy to think we understand something when we really don't. when we just are skimming over the surface of what we're doing. I wanted to give you a couple of other quotes, and I'll have to do them for memory because for some reason or other, I've misplaced them. The Buddha basically said that ignorance and desire are our reasons for incarnating, and to break the back of those two things, we are able to escape the wheel. Well, it sounds easy to escape ignorance. All you have to do is learn something. Well, we learn things a lot of times where we're just skimming the surface. It doesn't take root deep within us. And it is sometimes through repetition that we're able to get into a deeper understanding of something like the 12 Nidanas, like the signs of the zodiac. And through that deeper understanding, start applying it to our lives and seeing, yes, I was screaming at this person because they had the wrong answer. And I was trying to get them to be in compliance with my ideal. But I was ignorant of the circumstances that led that person to the decisions that they had come to in their life. And so we learn little bit by little bit from life. I try to take information in from everything and everyone that could be helpful. There's somebody who for many, many years has read my newsletter, listened to things on talks that I've given on the internet, and nice fellow and very sincere and extremely talented, but he often, almost always, has very scathing criticisms of things that I talk about or judge. And he clearly has a different mindset than I do. And for one reason or another, I fear it's my master puts this person in my life. And it is an irritation, but it's an irritation that should spark a new consciousness, something coming to the surface. And of course, it's helped me uncover my own intolerance and to become more tolerant, to become more sympathetic in my own thinking, and to be able to see in every single person our own higher consciousness, our own spiritual master, God in another form, and to be able to allow that to relinquish all of the negativity in us. It's been amazing help for me, and perhaps it can be for you as well. I could go, I am interested if any of you have thoughts on what we're talking about today. I know that I've deviated fairly dramatically format-wise from things that I normally talk about in these Q&A sessions. I initially set this up as if people just had questions. Oh, you talked about this in your newsletter. Could you expand on it? Or, is that full moon, all good, or is there some negative in it? Or what does Jupiter trine Mercury mean? But it sort of rapidly degenerated into other things, which were all of the more important things: climate change, the war in Ukraine, the presidential elections, and gun control, on and on of, current issues, which are fine. And I've enjoyed it. And I've sort of interjected a new direction in his talk today. So if any of you want to either share a thought or ask a question, unmute yourself and let me know what you're thinking. I don't know that I know how to unmute you, I'm not good at this, but if you don't know, if you have some thoughts and you're not able to unmute yourself, you can share them by email or even right now in the chat thing that's at the bottom of your screen. It's fine. I realize that this may be something that is a little bit abstruse to people, but I'm here for you. If you have a thought on this and you want to share, fine. If you don't, I'm appreciative that you all chose to spend a little bit of Father's Day with me, Juneteenth, and I want you to take away this one thought. Even though you can use the 12 Nidanas and the signs of the zodiac to obtain liberation, I'm well aware that most of us, most of the time, even when we say we're trying to obtain liberation, most of us aren't trying to escape the illusion. We're just trying to make the illusion a little bit more comfortable. And it is a blessing when you realize, hey, the jig is up. All of this is nothing. All of these things that I think exist don't exist, including myself. That's a big step. People go, they become yogis, they go high on the inner planes of consciousness, and they don't have to give up their individual existence. But to obtain liberation, you have to give up that. And as Meher Baba says in his discourses on karma and reincarnation, it is the thirst for individual existence that keeps the soul coming back into creation. Judy Luther asked a question, and I'm going to, she asked in chat, how is the zodiac the same as the 12 Nidanas? Well, I'm going to put that chart back up again. And
can I clarify the question?
Sure, go ahead.
I understand the 12 signs of the zodiac. I haven't seen a list of 12 Nidanas. Do they have different names? In other words,
no, these are the names of the 12 Nidanas here: ignorance, karma, consciousness, name and form, six senses, contact, preferences, desire, clinging, becoming, birth, and death. I should have had, a heading here, signs of the zodiac. Let me see.
That's all right. I just didn't intuit that.
No, well, it was me. Oh, God. How about that? Well, that is the typeface of Kepler. Let me see if I can put it in Gaudi old style, the zodiac. And then over here, let me see. Okay. So the thing to remember is the Buddha was, brilliant manifestation of Occam's razor. In other words, just keep it simple and direct. And his teachings are simple and direct. And it's interesting, there's voluminous amount of writings that have come out of the Buddhist incarnation. I just use the simplest words here. This word karma is often translated as mental formation, and other things have other names, and go on and on, like death is old age, suffering and death. But I just wanted to keep it as simple as possible. What I might share with you is some commentators on Buddhism have said that ignorance and karma refer to your last lifetime. Birth and death refer to your next lifetime. And the Gemini to Capricorn are the ones, consciousness to becoming, are the ones that refer to things in this lifetime. Again, I can't count the number of times over the last 48 years or so that I've carried many times a day into my meditation, the 12 Nidanas, and worked on it. It's their intertwinement with each other and with other concepts that we use all the time in astrology are just massive. Buddha was not interested in explaining. What he was interested in was giving the groundwork for people to have their own experience. He didn't say, follow me. He said, sit down, do your meditation, and follow yourself. Get rid of all the garbage, all the trinkets, all of the, the rosaries, all of the, the gods and goddesses and all of that stuff. Well, great, true. And the 12 Nidanas refers to, even though it, the reference points look like they may go to things in the environment, they're not. They're all mental states. They all have to do with what goes on inside of our own consciousness. And you may say, well, contact, that's contact with the external world. It's the experience of contact. It's that matters, not the literal substance itself. Well, karma, doesn't that have to do with other people? Well, it's your carrying of the karma. And the other earth sign, of course, Capricorn, becoming, doesn't that mean manifesting something in the external world? Well, yes, you can look at it that way, but that wasn't the intent of it. The intent was just to understand these internal states. Anyway, we've gone on a little bit further than I intended to today. And as I said, I've stumbled many times, and probably the reason I've never talked this way before, not just here, but anywhere, is because I've stumbled mightily on how is the best way to tie all of this up. How do I explain something that I experience as this complex web of illusion? And the web of illusion itself becomes a vehicle for carrying us out of the illusion. It's an amazing thing, using Maya to overcome Maya. Anyway, thank you for your question. Thank you for your participation. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. And so I'm going to leave you now. And I thank you once again. And we will doubtless meet again.